And we are live. Okay, so so thank you all for joining me. Um, I am Madam Vice President Dawn Chanet Collins of East Baton Rouge Parish School System. I am so excited to have joining me the awesome, illustrious Mr. Raymond Jeston with MetroMorphosis, Asia Reese with Humanities Amp, and Brother Chris Tyson, who is co-author of this amazing project we're going to get talking about, Black Baton Rouge, yesterday and today. Um, so let me first just start by, okay, let me first start by putting my phone on mute. And then let me explain why I have resumed doing these roundtable discussions. I had the pleasure of doing a series of roundtable talks last year. People really enjoyed it, and so I said, well, why not continue doing it? I enjoyed doing them, and in my capacity as vice president of the Baton Rouge school system, um, I know that we all know that racial tension, et cetera, is very high right now. We can't just put our head in the sand and pretend like nothing is going on. And so one small step in the right direction, that's easy for people to access and think through and able to be in a space to be open is something I started. Is a culture and diversity reader where there's a selection of readings for each month. February is Black History Month, so quite naturally, the book selections are around things dealing with Black history. Next month is Women's History Month, and I'm so excited that next month will be on women's history. And so, just a quick spotlight of what's on the reader as a suggested reading for this month. Of course, Black Baton Rouge, Yesterday and Today by Dr. Lori Martin and Christopher J. Tyson. Which is a project, of MetroMorphosis, and they will dig deep and give us some insight on that and how the project came to be just shortly. Another book that I have on the list is 400 Souls, is a recent release. 400 Souls, A Community History of African America by Ibram X. Kendi and Keisha N. Blaine. Then I also have some fiction reading for those who like fiction. Some Sing, some Cry by Nsaki Shangi, and then also The Warmth of Other Suns, excellent nonfiction read, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. Uh, Next month, again, Women's History Month, and two books that I have on there is My Own Words by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then Anonymous is a Woman, a Global Chronicle of Gender Inequality by Nina Ansari. And she did an excellent job of being very diverse in the women she spotlight. And a lot of awesome women that, in terms of history, hadn't heard about before. So check those out. And also on March, Hidden Figures, The American Dream and the Untold Story of Black Women Mathematicians Who Helped Win the Space Race by Margot Lee Shetterly. So that's just a few highlights of what's on the Diversity Reader. If you want to see the full list for the whole 12 months, hit up my website, DawnChanetCollins.com, DawnChanetCollins.com, and click on the Madam Vice President tab, and you will see where you can download the full listing. Okay, and so with that, I will allow each person to introduce themselves, and let's start off with Brother Raymond Jetson.
Madam Vice President, I just have to say that is a powerful list that you have there and some absolutely wonderful resources. So thank you for sharing that. I am Raymond Jetson, and I serve as the Chief Executive Catalyst at MetroMorphosis.
Thank you, sir. All right, Miss Asia.
Hi everyone, my name is Asia Reese. I currently serve at Humanities through Serve Louisiana, and I serve as a community educator. Be happy to be here.
Thank you. Brother Tyson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Tyson. I'm CEO of Build Baton Rouge, our redevelopment authority. I'm also on the law faculty at LSU Law School. And Dawn, thank you so much for making space for this and your incredible reading list. It's very impressive, and that's just great programming for the community. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining me. And so with that, what we'll do with the time we have is that, uh, Brother Jetson, if you can go ahead and share, what inspired this project, tell folks what the project is, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much again. And so the document that has been at the center of this month, and as I was sharing before we started, it has just far exceeded my best imagination in what could be. The motivation behind the document is deeply rooted in the Ghanaian concept of Sankofa. uh, and the Akan tribe in Ghana talks about making benevolent use of the past. And at the heart of it is this notion of a careful investigation of the past in order to understand the present and gain the knowledge needed for the future. And so we wanted to create this moment where we paused to look at the part of the history of Black folks in Baton Rouge and things, the context in which things happened, in order to one, have a better grasp of our history, because so many folks are unaware of the rich history of Black folks in Baton Rouge. And so we wanted to do that. But then secondly, we were firmly convinced that a historical context would allow us to understand some of the things that we currently see. And so, for example, something close to your heart, education of young kids and the school system, there are some things that have happened in the past that directly contribute to what we see today in our school system. And so to allow people to understand their current through a historical context. But then finally, the most important thing for us is to prompt people to begin to say, now that we have looked at our past, and now that we have a context for our future, what does this, I mean, for our present, what does this mean for our future? And so we reached out. Brother Tyson had actually written a small part of this document 4 years ago for the Urban Congress on African American Males, because we thought that it was important to situate that work around Black boys and men in a historical context. And so Christopher was kind enough to write a piece for that. Dr. Laurie Martin and I had worked together on a book, and I teased to her and say she was gracious enough to allow me to put my name on with her, a book called South Baton Rouge, where we looked at a slice of some of the rich life that is South Baton Rouge. And so I reached out to Dr. Martin and Chris and asked if they would be willing to take those two works, bring them together, expand upon them, and create a work. And we wanted to create a document that we could stimulate activity, that we could share broadly, and invite and cause some people to look at the rich history of Black folks in Baton Rouge. And so that was the motivation behind it. And as I've said now for the third time, what has happened over this month has just been amazing to watch happen. just even yesterday with the school systems,
Mhm.
virtual Black History program being situated around this notion of Black futures, a Sankofa series.
Now, go ahead and share a little bit more, if you will, about some of the things that have spurred from the publication of this project.
So we kicked off the event with a community conversation in Scotlandville. And so we had a panel of folks from Scotlandville to come together to look at what the document said about Scotlandville, to discuss their thoughts on that and their thoughts on the present and their dreams for the future for Scotlandville. We also had a similar conversation in South Baton Rouge at the McKinley Alumni Center, and to see folks from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, along with one representative of the 2000s, to see these folks in a room talking about South Baton Rouge, talking about the rich history of McKinley, which the document points out started off as the Hickory Street School in 1906, I believe. And to hear them talk about that was rich. But the moment that blew me away was the folks from Scotlandville were watching the South Baton Rouge Zoom
Uh-huh.
and put in the comments that Scotlandville and South Baton Rouge need to get together and talk about the things that are happening in their neighborhoods and
Uh-huh.
talk about how they could work together. We
Oh, that's
also, Don, had more than 23 churches to
mhm.
have Black history programming around the document. The NAACP did one of their weekly sessions this month around activism and civil rights actions that are highlighted in the document. The school system hosted their Black history program. And while there were a number of wonderful things yesterday that happened, to watch Myra Richardson interview Maxine Cormier
Uh-huh.
and to watch Anthony Kinney interview Press Robinson
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was just really, really powerful and rich. And so there have just been, and I've been on probably a half dozen Zoom calls. Yesterday, Dr. Martin and Chris and I took part in the One Rouge Coalition call that happens on Friday morning. 55 folks, just a multiplicity of organizations represented. And so it's just been exciting to watch happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Asia, tell me about Humanities App. What inspired y'all to did you reach out to MetroMorphosis, or MetroMorphosis reached out to you, or how did that come about? And
Well, I'm pretty sure Mr. Jessica can express more on that side because I don't want to misspeak because I don't necessarily know who made the initial connection, but I know when I was invited to join the conversation, there was just a lot of excitement about the article produced by MetroMorphosis and just brainstorming ways to make this information accessible to the wider community, as MetroMorphosis has done a beautiful job, but also to our students. Just eventually the conversation came to a point where I was like, well, why don't we have an event to really just show how this article comes to life and really live in that spirit of Sankofa? Like the past is always happening in the present. Like my professor once told me that these divisions of time are artificial, you know, like we're constantly living in all three of these moments. And that's where this idea for this intergenerational conversation that Ms. Justin was just talking about happened. And I think that for a lot of the students, it really made a lot of what the article discussed as far as the different civil rights leaders and the different actions that a lot of Black folks have taken to allow us to just even be in schools and be able to get the kind of education we have. I think it showed them that, like, one, these people are still alive, still working, and there's a lot of young people looking to pick up the torch, and they all started at a really young age. And so more than anything, we wanted the students to understand that at any age they could be civically engaged and involved, almost like a call to action. And I think the most my favorite part of like what the article inspired was seeing the students' artworks that reflected the article, and like seeing some of the students even incorporate the Sankofa bird. It was just really beautiful to just, and then like reading their statements and how like they interpreted the meaning of this and just made it translate to make sense for them. I think that this shows the power of like having this kind of history accessible to students, because I mean, I know I went to McKinley High School too. We were a predominantly Black school at that point, but the history that we learned didn't really reflect our lived experience and our identities. And so I think that it's really empowering for students to see that Black people have always been here. Black people have always been working, and they've been working with you in mind, with you having a better future in mind, and you have to keep that energy going. So that was my overall just reaction to the event. I think it went really well, and I really enjoyed it. And it wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the article.
And I would just, I want to jump in real quick and say I did reach out to Dr. West,
Okay.
but I didn't finish asking before she had already said yes.
That sounds about right. Okay, well, Asia, tell me, for those who were not able to view yesterday or what have you, give people some insight on what happened, how the programming went.
So with some help from different EBR school board members, big shout out to Mr. Jeffrion, we had this idea to have 2 intergenerational conversations, and then like a kind of student showcase for the 3rd event. Far as thinking about who should be in those conversations, I did think it should be balanced and gender representation, so our young men and women both can see that like you, no matter what's your gender, you can be a leader. So I think that was one really powerful part of it. We also wanted those connections between the youth activists and the community elder to be natural. And like both of those, I think both of them, like both of the groups that spoke, I think they kind of reflected that. And Miss Sharita, big shout out to Miss Sharita at MetroMorphosis, she was the one who actually suggested instead of an interview, this should be a conversation. Like the elders should be asking the youth the questions, and the youth should be asking the elders the questions. And I just thought I think that just took it to a whole nother level. For like I remember one question that Dr. Robinson asked Anthony Kinney, and I was just thinking to myself, he was like, how would you define an activist? And I think it was just moments like that just really made it really real for the students. And then for the 3rd part, we had our kind of fresh sheet, which is a program that Humanities has picked up, and it's a live poetry set. It's traditionally a live poetry set, outside of COVID, but we adapted it, of course, because of everything going on with the pandemic. And we were able to show students artworks, and we had some live performances from some recent Humanities alumnus. But we were also able to show like different students' submissions videos, and just showing that they have like their voice, and they were also just like celebrating the Black experience. So it was a really good program. I think that it was really great that we had so many different levels of representation far as age. I think that was like the one thing that we really worked hard on.
If you don't mind, I want to dig deep on some of the conversation highlights. You mentioned that former school board member Press Robinson had asked a very powerful question. How did the young brother respond to the question?
He responded by, and I'm like loosely quoting him, so Anthony, if you listen. And I really agree with his answer that an activist is someone who's constantly getting involved. And Dr. Robinson even added on to his definition, like instead of sitting on the sidelines complaining, like the activist is going to identify the issue and try to work towards a solution. And I think that was a really powerful gem for me, because even though I do feel like I'm getting involved constantly, it just kind of was another reminder that like you have to stay active. And just even Dr. Robinson talking about the course of his life. I go to Spelman, he went to Morehouse, and he was saying how he was just deeply inspired by his time in the AUC, and then like coming here back to Baton Rouge, and just like this kind of staying constantly involved in like in education and keeping young folks educated. I think like he also he was a living example of kind of what an activist can look like to me. And Yeah, I kind of deviated from the question a bit, but that's how you define an activist.
Yeah, but if I could jump in real quick, because I think Asia touched on something that was really, really powerful, and it
Mhm.
was unspoken in the sense of Dr. Robinson asked the young man for his definition of an activist. And when he gave his answer was describing the life that Press Robinson had lived. And it
Okay.
was just this really powerful moment that was not spoken in that way, but you
Mhm.
could just get it and you could see it in that moment. And it was really powerful.
Mr. Justin, we're here. We're here.
Yeah.
That's literally like that's why I think I went there, because I was like, wow, like everything that Anthony was describing that he wants to do, and just even thinking about my own definitions, I see this so beautifully represented in Dr. Robinson. So I'm really glad that we were able to get him to speak, and he's just so sweet and humble. Like I love him.
I sidebar, I had you know, you clean out your boxes and throw away stuff that you've been holding on to for no reason because you hadn't looked at them in 10 years. So I was cleaning out, got a new desk, and I was cleaning out the old file cabinet to make room. And I had my paper from National Honor Society when I was graduating from high school, going into college. And guess who nominated me? Press Robinson. And looking at that, you know, at the time, what did I know of the significance? So I put that to the side, and I'm gonna get a nice little frame and put it on my wall. Looking back, hindsight 2020, that's such an honor, right? And so then one more question, Asia, the intergenerational conversations, and you touched on it a little bit. Uh, how receptive were the young people to the older generation? I know, like, I have a background of community advocacy myself prior to getting on the school board, and now on the school board. And I know sometimes in my experience, I've watched sometimes the much younger generation, uh, because it's not relevant to them, what happened in the past. And I've even heard uh, young folks say, well, what is the NAACP? It's just not relevant to them in this time. And so how was the dynamic with the event you had on Friday?
The young folks were very engaged. I actually am just sad that we weren't even able to like get to all of their questions in the time that we had allotted. But they really were posing questions just to both speakers. I think that was the benefit of it being intergenerational. I think both of our young activists that came represented the more youth perspective. What they did was just really pull out the fact that not only can our elders drop knowledge on us, but also that like this is important for us to understand that like if we're not intentional about preserving this history and like learning from our elders and getting these oral histories, then they'll be lost. And I think that was another thing that was like, to Mr. Justin's point, that wasn't explicitly said, but I think that just kind of emerged. And I think a lot of the young folks, once they kind of realized just like, wow, like these was really big key players. Maxine and Dr. Robinson in their own respects, like were the first for Black people in a lot of different areas in Black Baton Rouge. I think that the young folks got really like curious just about their perspectives on the ability for Baton Rouge to change. That was like kind of a thematic question that was coming up just because they had been working on these different issues for so long. And I think the answers that came from those questions were really interesting. So I think the young folks were like really engaged, and they definitely posed probably the majority of their questions to the elders. And they also did pose a lot to the youth activists too. But I think that they were like more, to your point, Ms. Collins, just more interested than I think, like, had they not been prompted to, than they might have been before. So I'm glad that that was one like big takeaway from the event.
Awesome. I think too, it was even more so relevant because it was people here, which goes to the point of what Brother Justin was saying about the need to do Black Baton Rouge. I think it helped it to hit home for those young people even more so. So now gonna move forward, and Brother Tyson, if you could share your experience as co-author of this work, and then also share some things about, that's in the work itself, maybe spotlight a few things, so people can say, oh yeah, you know what, let me go check out the full work.
Sure. When we, thinking back to when Raymond first invited me to be a part of MetroMorphosis in the Urban Congress, and we thought about, I believe it was the first convening, Raymond, when we thought about how to situate this project, which was, to be a long-term endeavor as it has been, to situate that contextually. Right, to say that this is the history out of which this moment is coming, and here are the things about ourselves that we need to know in order to be, fully present in this moment and moving towards the future. And so we wrote that initial document. It was just to kind of compile a very brief high-level history of Black Baton Rouge for the purpose, and I think Raymond mentioned this earlier, and he knows that I'm always going to harp on this, so that we have an understanding of what is going on in the present, so that we aren't susceptible to many of the tortured narratives about Black communities that are anchored in stereotypes and lies and ahistorical, kind of understandings of what is going on around us, right? That if we can put this in its proper context, not only do we, rewrite these narratives, right, but we also, I think, speak to each other about who we are and our complexity and our diversity within the Black community, our resilience, and our genius, right? And that was something we felt Baton Rouge needed. We have a very rich history, as I hope this document touches upon, and I know all of us here on the call appreciate. But that's not always as well known as it should be, right? It's not as internalized as it needs to be in the community. And so you can never stop retelling, you can never stop sharing, you can never stop peeling back the onion and sharing these stories and understanding the history of places and neighborhoods and people and movements and institutions, and periods of time, the contributions of each generation. So that was, the motivation for doing this. And when Raymond called a few months ago and said, look, can we expand upon what we have and add to it? I was happy to do so. And again, this document doesn't tell the whole story, right? There's still stories that need to be told. There's still histories that we need to uncover and then curate and celebrate in documents like these and programs like the ones you all just covered, and in discussions like the one you're hosting right now, Don. So that was, just to kind of give you the headspace that we were in, and thinking about this and its importance and its significance. There's so many stories captured in here. You asked me kind of what, in the history do I think is important to know. Obviously, I have I puff my chest out like hopefully a lot of Baton Rougeans when we talk about having the first organized bus boycott of the civil rights movement. That is a historical note that I think needs to be better appreciated around the country. That Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and others traveled here to Baton Rouge to blueprint what would go on as the Montgomery bus boycotts and the other organized demonstrations of the civil rights movement. I think it's important to really understand what's going on with the sit-ins in 1960 Southern University students, and for us to really sit with the risk, right? The governor's edict at the time that any university student or faculty or administrator who participated in a civil rights protest would be expelled or fired. And the chilling effect that is intended to have on activism. And I want us to understand that so that we can then fully appreciate what those students are doing and what is at risk
Mhm.
when they take part in those sit-ins. And then to think about the broader structures of power and influence that are operating in state politics that view civil rights protests as such a threat, and to sit with that. I want us to think deeply about what it means. Don, you're on the school board. Um, we have one of the, we have an award-winning park system here in Baton Rouge. It's an amenity for all. And that's important, right? Public parks are an important amenity provided by local governments. They say something about citizenship. They say something about linked fate, our shared culture, right? That we can recreate together and that our city is beautiful. So think about that and think about the idea that we would rather fill in a pool,
Mhm.
remove, remove an amenity
Mhm.
from a community
Mhm.
and not just Black folks, right? You're not just punishing Black people. You are retarding the urban growth of the entire city.
Mhm.
Everybody suffers.
Mhm.
That would be preferable than
Mhm.
the risk that Black and white children would swim together.
Uh-huh.
Um, and again, this is not to we're not mocking these past decisions. It's a very solemn mood, I think, that we put ourselves in to contemplate that. And that's for all of us to contemplate, right? Because when, as I do, every day at Build Baton Rouge, and we think about how do communities become disinvested?
Mhm.
How does blight become so pervasive? How do neighborhoods go into decline? How is there such a maldistribution of resources, such a spatial imbalance in one city, right?
Mhm.
Um, the things that we are told are offered as explanations usually amount to somebody made a poor decision or somebody has poor values or an entire people or entire neighborhood don't respect their communities or their families or what have you, right? And we've heard that over and over and over again. And we know now we're in a period of an explosion of interest in cities and the racial dimensions of the nation's urban development history, right? So people are coming to understand what redlining meant and what blockbusting meant, and how the Federal Home Loan Corporation underwrote mortgages almost exclusively for white borrowers for the first 30 years of the program, blocking out Black families from accumulating wealth, accessing housing, passing that on to intergenerationally, and in the cumulative effects of all of that, right? We're coming to understand that the writing of Ta-Nehisi Coates, the writing of Richard Rothstein, and so many others are bringing that history, which has always been there, right, to a mass audience. So it's important that we do that same investigation here in Baton Rouge. And again, just so we can solemnly reflect on how we got here. And if I think we are making the diagnosis of the problem, right, with the correct information, then we have a better chance of charting the right future. So I'll pause there, but obviously I get very excited about these topics.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you. So look, just to touch on that, and I got excited. I said, well, I got to later on when I close out and I mention some books on the rest of the list, I'll make sure I mention this, Brother Tyson. You helped me to that, and I thought about that obviously because you talked about the red line and how people just don't really understand that neighborhoods didn't become blighted and disinvested by chance. And so then to look at the outcome and point fingers and say those people is exceptionally misguided. And so then along those lines, I thought about the proverbial Mason-Dixon line here in Baton Rouge, that Florida Boulevard. and how it's easy to kind of see a difference in investment and divestment on either side. And so saying, lifting that up, and I drew a note to Color of Law. Did you want to maybe, are there things in Black Baton Rouge yesterday and today that correlate to what's discussed in Color of Law by Richard Rothstein?
You know, we don't spend a lot of time going into that particular policy history. Obviously, we understand the development of the interstate system, and Rothstein talks about federal highway policy and how that happens. The interstate system, one of the biggest infrastructure achievements in American history, was at the local level, right? These decision making, the money came from the feds, but the decision was made at the local level. And virtually in every city, in Baton Rouge is no exception, you can find historic Black neighborhoods with the path of the interstate. Our interstate, when it is developed in the under the federal highway program in the late 50s and early 60s, it cuts through Old South Baton Rouge, right there, to the west of South 10th Street. Took out my great grandparents' old grocery store. It ends its first phase, literally bisecting the Valley Park neighborhood. And that is covered in news reports, and so the impact of interstate construction on Black communities is well known. New Orleans has an incredible story about the Claiborne corridor, obviously. That's everywhere you go, and so that is a corollary there with Rothstein's work as well.
And Don, I would jump in real quick and say that the other part of what Chris and Dr. Martin highlight in the book is the impact of the interstate, but also something that as a school board member has particular relevance for your work, the desegregation order. When Judge West, I believe it was, insisted upon the desegregation by busing. The degree of white flight that occurred, especially in where Chris and his Build Baton Rouge team is focused now on the Plank Road corridor. When you look at the white flight of some of those folks who had been employees of Standard Oil and Esso and Exxon, who left the Plank Road corridor, the North Baton Rouge community, I mean, there is a direct correlation between that moment in time and what begins to happen in North Baton Rouge.
And I believe
that
Go ahead, and I will jot down my.
No, I just wanted to piggyback on that, because if you're at all familiar with the work we're doing in Build Baton Rouge across the city, Electric Depot and Ardendale, but one of our big projects is on Plank Road, a master plan for that area. Really excited about that. When we speak to people who are unfamiliar with Baton Rouge's history, they say, okay, well, tell us about these historic Black neighborhoods along Plank Road. And I said, well, we have historic Black neighborhoods in Baton Rouge, but actually the neighborhoods of Plank Road are not what we call historic. They certainly have been, predominantly Black neighborhoods for at least the last, 30 years or so. But the neighborhoods of Plank Road are developed for the white working class workers of the Standard Oil plant, right? That is the history of those neighborhoods. Raymond, I know you can tell the story of integrating a Struma Middle School back in your childhood. And so if you talk to Black folks of a certain age in Baton Rouge, they don't have a lot of memories of going to Delmont Shopping Center in the 50s. You didn't go there. And so you were in Scotlandville, you were in Easytown and Eden Park, you were in Old South Baton Rouge. So talking about the transformation of space, right? And the ways in which we have evolved spatially in Baton Rouge about what is North and what is South, right? What some scholars have called the racialization of space, right? And how we have these shorthands and these monikers that are really speaking to us about where there is value, where there is risk, and what is, you know, the part of the city we want to celebrate and the part of the city we want to turn our back to. And so that is, you know, telling that story about Plank Road is so valuable because yes, it is a, you know, almost entirely Black community now, but you know, there along that corridor is an important part of this community, and I mean that in the broadest sense, right? A part of our history, a very difficult part of our history, because so many of the people who lived through that transformation are still with us and remember that, and the decisions that were made, social, political, and otherwise, are still very much with us as well.
Yes. Okay. Now, oh yeah, responded to a chat somebody sent. So you mentioned that, and so I've begun to frame it conceptually. Obviously, it's not new because you just said it, but I've begun to frame that as traveling white flight, right? You know, like just like you said, Plank Road was not predominantly Black at one time. Neither was Glen Oaks. Neither was where I am in my district today. A generation ago, it was predominantly white. And so I have fond memories as a small child going to Robert E. Lee Theater, the $1 theater at the time. It just goes to show you how time passes and things change. So, and I'm glad you went into that. I wrote down, let's see. It was something that Brother Judson said that I wrote down. Oh, yes, past education in EBR, and you touched on it, so I can check that off on my to-do list to discuss. But you know, was there anything else, Brother Judson, as it relates to past education history with the school system in EBR before we
So
move?
I would, with your permission, I'd like to ask my little sister, Miss Asia Reese, as somebody who went to McKinley and who graduated from McKinley, uh, when you look back on this conversation that has happened, that you were engaged in a very different way than so many other young people, what's the one thing you take away from it?
That's a great question. I think just what the article creates for me and thinking about McKinley and just education in the past, and I don't know, I think it just gave me and this was actually kind of talked about, I think, by Anthony in the dialogue. It made me realize how important it is for educational spaces to affirm their students' identity. It also just made me think about how much education, I think this is a point that you touched on, Mr. Tyson, was so vehemently denied to Black people. And that is very, when you really kind of sit with that, this, how much effort went into like denying us a very like basic things to the point of like inconvenience. I think it just really gives you a different level of conviction about being serious about learning and being well read, because I think it gives you a just like a call to action to just realize how important it is and how much people have to fight for this. Because I don't want to call it a luxury, because education should be something that I believe everybody can get. But it was so denied. I just think it needs to be revered almost as such, if that makes any sense. So I think that's one of my takeaways.
And thank you so much, Asia. And Don, for me, the thing in this wonderful document, and I will share with folks, you know, you can certainly download it at the MetroMorphosis site. It's 40 something pages, so it's certainly not an exhaustive and complete look at the history of Black folks, but I do in Baton Rouge, but I do think that it touches on some really, really important moments. The thing in reading all of this document, the thing that makes me smile the most every time I read it is the part where Chris and Dr. Martin talk about the Barack Obama visit to Baton Rouge and him going to McKinley. And so you have this historical community in South Baton Rouge and this historical institution in McKinley, and you have this walking history in this first Black president, all coming together in this one space. And there's a piece where Ed Pratt talks about his thoughts of his mother, who's no longer here, and how she would see that moment. And it is just, it's everything that I'd hope for and more when I read that section of the document.
Yep, and if I could just add to that point, because I was there, I was at McKinley at that time. Just how that's highlighting the document and how so much of like institutions like McKinley, and I even want to add Scotlandville to this conversation, was highlighting the document for being so important for Black Baton Rouge history. I do really wish that the historical legacy of these spaces were regarded more, I guess, like in the ways that they are financially supported and the ways that like the infrastructures are taken care of, because so much of Black Baton Rouge history is tied to these institutions. And just like how I think HBCUs get this kind of level of treatment because they are regarded as historical spaces, I do wish like these high schools could kind of get that same level of reverence in ways that they are supported and upkept to, just to your point, Mr. Jetson.
And when the world goes back to having gatherings in person and in spaces, book the McKinley Alumni Center.
All right. One thing I'll mention along the lines of education, and if you want to elaborate on it, anyone, please do. But Reverend Mr. Jetson, Brother Jetson, just keep on the call you, Reverend Jetson. I had time conflict, and I regret that I was not able to view the program yesterday. And saying that, was the program yesterday recorded?
Yes, it was. So we streamed it on YouTube Live, and I'm not mistaken, I think whenever you stream something on YouTube Live, it's available there on the channel. So
I will share that. I'm making a note for myself. I'll share it, and then of course I'll go back and watch. But I was asking somebody about it, and they mentioned that one thing that was interesting to them was when Press Robinson said that when he got on the board, his biggest push was not so much the DSEG, but the getting of the resources, right? And you want to talk about it? I see you shaking.
He went, Don, he went even further than that.
Okay.
He said, we made a mistake. And he said that his push was get the resources. And he went on to say that at that time, there was these amazing teachers who were in the historically Black schools. They had credentials. Most of them had masters and 30 plus and other things in these schools. And so the schools had the instructional and the leadership. What they did not have were resources. And so his push was for the money. But the more powerful voice was for integration. And he says that at this point, it turns out to be a bad bargain that was made for so many kids. And so to hear him say that and to be, unapologetic, to not beat around to the bush, but to say, this was a really important moment. And so I think, for example, and we're about to face another similar moment, but different, in that this is a year for redistricting.
Yes.
And when we look at the makeup of districts on state government and local government, on boards and commissions, I think we're going to have to ask the question, do we want impact and influence, or do we want to just have numbers? And so I think really being thoughtful about these kind of decisions is really important. And that's what I took from Dr. Robinson's just really powerful statement.
Yes, and you see it still playing out today in terms of where the resources and the talent, you know, let me say this, school board member hat on all the way. I need everybody to know, don't come poaching my talent from my schools, in my struggling schools with my come on, leave my good talent at my schools. Let the word, let me get the bullhorn. Where my bullhorn? I just had to finish fussing because one of my schools had a teacher of the year that got poached because he was awesome. And so another department needed. You know, how often does it happen that great talent on struggling campuses get recruited for campuses that's already doing great, and then of course it's easy for them to leave because who doesn't want to go to a non-struggling campus?
But it's something that Chris said.
All right.
That's really deep embedded in this, and it is these decisions we make around what is valuable and should be supported and invested in, and what is not of value and thus not worthy of investing in.
Yeah, think about how so many students are forced to, like, with this false binary of like, should I go to a school with resources or should I go to a school where in the community of where I'm from? And I think it's such a disservice to our students for them to feel like the places that they come from aren't worthy of the resources that they want and deserve. I just think that that's something that I really I still see going on. And I remember feeling that tension often being a student that was in the gifted program. So I really just appreciate what the conversation is right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful point. Myself and my community, in my area, my jurisdiction, I'm real big on advocating for, I mean, I'm not saying don't look for options and choose the best option for your child, but don't take for granted that the best option for your child and this community is right here. And how can we build up right here if we keep running over there? It just doesn't work. And so we have to be more mindful in how we approach things. And that's not to say that people shouldn't choose outside opportunities, but sometimes we miss out and don't recognize what we have at home when we choose that mindset. So really quickly, we have 5 minutes left. Let me just mention this comment from the beautiful Anna West. She posted on Facebook in the comment section of our live feed. She said, how is there such a spatial imbalance in one city? In my years helping students frame their own culturally responsive research projects, this is really the question that students, EBR, public school system, high school students at traditional schools, all right, our babies out here asking some important questions, ask again and again through different iterations. We cannot underscore the importance of having resources to draw from as these young scholars in our community work to understand how did it get this way and how do we change it. That's just one of the important implications of this resource, speaking in terms of the Black Baton Rouge Yesterday and Today publication. It helps us to begin building a culturally relevant learning context for our students. Thanks, Chris, Lori, and MetroMorphosis for your work to make this history available to us. So I saw that and I said, let me make sure I read that out before we close out. We have 4 minutes left. Any closing thoughts from anyone? Anybody want to say anything before I close out?
I just want to ask Chris Tyson, are you going to accept my call when I reach out to you to update it for next year?
Look, you're getting ahead of me, because I was gonna put a nice appeal out to say that anyone who wants to write and research history, this is your opportunity. There's the phase 2, chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5 are waiting to be written.
So Asia, maybe that's for your generation, my sister.
And I just want to really commend everyone who's going home to like use those conversation starters that y'all provided on y'all's website, and just all the teachers who have been prompting their students to engage with the work. I want to give a big shout out to the teacher I work with at Bel Air High School, Miss Payne, because she's always trying to promote culturally relevant learning. And she was also one of our teachers that showed up yesterday. And just really the fact that teachers are just taking the initiative to try to include this article and just include Black history in the curriculums on their own. I think that's something that I really want to celebrate, just the initiative of our teachers to try to affirm their students. It's just what I'm thinking about right now.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so again, this is part of my culture and diversity reader project. There's a listing of suggested books to read one or read all each month. Each month is around a different theme. This month, of course, Black History Month. Next month is Women's History. And then April, we will actually deal with dynamics of classism in America. So there's some cool stuff. My favorite book for April is Soul on Ice, Eldridge Cleaver. And I'm reaching out to Vote and see if I can get my people from Vote on a roundtable discussion like this. All right, because sometimes we don't think about our incarcerated as a whole nother class of people. May is in recognition of Jewish Heritage Month as well as Teachers Appreciation Month. June, we'll be dealing with Pride Month. July will be a spotlight on Alice Walker and the interplay of race and gender. August is law and policies that create social economic hierarchies, and that's where the color of law comes into play, as well as supreme inequality, the Supreme Court's 50-year battle of a more unjust America by Adam Cohen. September, we'll deal with Hispanic Heritage Month. October, diverse perspective on self-awareness and healing. November is Native American Heritage Month, and then closing out December with recognition of Human Rights Day. One example from that, Left to Tell, one woman's story of surviving the Rwandan genocide by Immaculée Libigiza. Forgive me, sister, if I got your name wrong, the pronunciation. But again, the full list is available on DawnChanetCollins.com. That's DawnChanetCollins.com. Click on the Madam Vice President tab where you can download the full list. Each month, I will do at least one roundtable in the subject matter area for that month. And so I look forward to many more of these. Thank you all so much for joining me. I really enjoyed having you all. Y'all did great. I know people are really going to enjoy this roundtable discussion, and I appreciate you all so much for being my first roundtable discussion of 2021.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Until next time.
Thanks,
thank
Dawn.
y'all again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.